That's right. Oh, actually, wrong show. Welcome into the PHLY Eagles show presented by Bet365. Download the Bet365 app and use code PHLY365 when you sign up. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Welcome into the PHLY Eagles show presented by Bet365. I am Fran Duffy, joined first time by my friend, handsome Rich Hoffman. Rich, this would be a fun show.
Fran, it's good. It seems like you had a little force of habit with that intro earlier.
It was, I knew it like the first time I host a show. I got to squeeze that in there just for everybody that followed along at the last stop. So, no, but it's, I'm excited. Look, bye weeks are usually tough. It does feel weird, like the early bye. Do you like the early bye week?
So typically I don't. I mean, I just think I think for the players too, especially they would want to have it later in the season when they're a little more beat up. I think as a fan too, like you would think, all right, I only got 4 weeks of football here, right? Like I'm not tired of this yet. We could stretch this out into November and then, okay, let's take a little bit of a break. So yeah, I don't usually like it, but considering kind of how banged up this Eagles team is and how much they probably need to take a step back and reevaluate things, self scout, do all those things. Seems like for this particular group, this is not a bad one, I would say. What do you think?
Yeah, it's been the running joke for the better part of this week is everybody is saying like this team, this is a great time for this team to go on the bye week. And I feel like most teams, most years will say that. I do think that that's true for this team. Obviously from a health standpoint, it's big, but just to kind of get a little bit of a reset, figure things out on both sides of football, lick your wounds. You'd hate going into the bye after a loss like that, what you saw last week, just because that's the last thing you saw on film. But I do think this is a good opportunity for this team to reset button, both physically and mentally, and get ready for the back end. It feels weird, though, to say like the second half because you have so many games left on this schedule. I think it does feel good going into the bye week and just kind of, give you that little bit of a refresh there. You and I were talking just kind of leading in like, all right, what do we do for the show? I thought you had a great idea just for the structure of the show today.
Yeah. And before we get to that, I just want to ask you, because again, I think this is kind of how we are structuring the show in that like every Monday you are crunching the game, like you're crunching the tape on the game. So is the bye week a nice little reset for you? Do you, after you are done with that last game, do you just, I mean, obviously you're, with the way you love football and you work on terms of the draft and all those things, I'm sure you're watching a million college games and NFL games too at the same time. But as somebody who is, has to deal with that quick turnaround every week and then just get ready for the next week and get your notes out and those things, I'm sure this is probably an easier time. And I would say that that's how we're going to structure this show. As somebody who, I just watch the game. I get a little angry during the game. I don't pick up on everything. I might listen to talk radio. I certainly listen to PHLY Eagles all the time when I'm not on it. You go back and study it. And I read your articles every week and I get a kick out of like, when you were talking about the press coverage the other day, Fran, I was like,
yep.
I was after that game thinking, man, that was way too easy for the Bucs. And, they're playing so much off coverage. But then you pointed out, well, they played off coverage for 3 weeks and really the pass defense wasn't as big of a problem as the run game. So that is kind of how I want to structure this, where it's a little factor fiction we're going to play, where I'm going to give you maybe a narrative that a lot of fans have, that maybe I have, and you're going to tell me how true it might be. And like some of the times it might be, the eye test for us might actually match up with what you're seeing on a bunch of film study. And sometimes it might not be true. And I like being told that it's not exactly true. So let's get.
Well, I was going to say, it's funny because I've gotten a lot of follow-ups to that press coverage thing. And really the big thing is that you can be 7 yards off the ball, 8 yards off the ball, 9 yards off the ball, and still play tight coverage. Now, if the receiver runs 2 yards and turns around and the ball's on top of you, yeah, like it would have been beneficial to be in press in that scenario, but that was not what we saw, in this game against Tampa. It was a lot of those like deep in breaking routes and things like that where the guys just were wide open, and you can't have that. Right. And so I think that's the big thing. Were there individual reps where it would have been good if a guy was pressed up? Sure. But I do think most often that was not the case. So I did want to just kind of expand on that a little bit before we jumped in. To answer your first question, though, it is a little bit easier going into the bye. I still spent a chunk of yesterday and a chunk of today going through the Browns next week, just getting ahead. I usually will start the next week's opponent on the back end of the previous week. And so I watched a lot of Deshaun Watson today. So I'm not feeling too great about how my morning went this morning, but more on that next week as we start previewing the game against the Browns.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that makes sense. I mean, I can fully admit that, as fans, we don't like the off coverage when the coverage is poor. We probably don't give it enough credit when we're not noticing it. Like, when they are getting off the
Right.
field on third down and they are playing that off coverage. So that's kind of, the genre of what we're going with today. So the
Sure.
first thing I have for you, Fran, and I was listening to you and Bo talk the other day, and you were saying, I understand being multiple and, having all of these different tools is good, but you did kind of say like, hey, this team could use an identity. And it's something that Anthony has kind of said on his show. I've heard it a lot, that this needs to be, at least for now, more of a downhill running team with Saquon Barkley. And it's funny. I've noticed, Fran, during the first half of a lot of these games, we're all counting Saquon touches right now. Like it's all right. That's not enough, or he's not getting the ball on the right plays, or the game script isn't correct. And I was kind of thinking back. Do you remember the? Of course, you're going to remember this. The home opener, or not the home opener, the season opener in 2022, when Devontae Smith did not catch one ball, and
Yep.
AJ Brown had that crazy game, and that was like a minor talking point, like a little bit. But we didn't care as much because I believe the Eagles scored like 38 points in that game, and AJ Brown looked awesome. This is different, right? The offense has been a little more limited. There have been ups and downs. There have been turnovers. So I guess that's the question for you. Like, are they using Saquon Barkley the right way, the right amount, or does something need to change there?
Yeah, I mean, in this game against the Bucks, where you go 3 and out, 3 straight drives, and you would have liked to get some kind of momentum rolling early in the game, you would say it would be easy to point to and say, like, hey, like, could you get the run game going? Both times in both drives, or the first 2 drives, I should say, it's 2nd and 10 after an incompletion on first down, and that's when they hand the ball off. And 2nd and 10 is long as usually not a super prolific run down unless you're in 4 down territory, right? So, even if they did get 5 yards on the play, you're still getting to 3rd and 5, which this team has not shown that they can successfully get to 3rd and 5 all that well. So I think that when you look at it, they went 3 yards on the first run and they went 0 yards on the second run. And then that brought up 3rd and long, and they didn't get off the field on 3rd and long. On the third drive, they didn't run the ball at all. They tried to throw a screen to Barkley on the second down play. And so they tried getting things going early from that standpoint, but when you can't like convert on a series in terms of like getting a new first down, I mean, no one's able to get productive. So that's the way that they sold it after the game. And I think that is true, is that if you can't get anything going, it's tough to get the run game going. It's tough to get the drop back pass game going, the RPOs, everything, nothing worked for them, early on in that game. Now, as far as like an identity goes, I do think if you look at this team and you say, okay, which facet, offense, defense, and you super granular, like what is the best part? What is the best moments that we've seen from this team so far? I mean, it's the downhill run game with Saquon and with Jalen Hurts. It's both guys getting downhill, into their various blocking schemes, both zone schemes and gap schemes, but getting those guys going vertical downhill. That has been when this team has looked its best. And so I do think, you want to lean into that. But when you talk about like identity, it really is about finding what areas in all facets of your game plan, offense, defense, pass game, run game, like everything. What is it that we're doing well? How do we get into that more? How do we weed out the things that we're not doing well? And that's the only bad thing about having that early buy, is that you just have that small sample. And so I do think there's still going to be a little bit of a feeling out period for this team. I'll have to look at the schedule and see like when the next like mini buy is. But I think that that's probably the more realistic case where you're able to really kind of have that reset. But look, this is the hand that they're dealt here this year. You've got this 4-game sample. What is it that you're doing well on both sides? What is it you're not doing well? And again, from the pass game standpoint, that might be, what are the plays that Jalen has had most success with, where the offense has had most success with? My guess is that you're going to lean it to some of the things we saw in week 1 against Green Bay. Like the offense has never looked better than it did against the Packers down in Brazil. And then when you look at it structurally, the last 2 weeks, it's looked like a different scheme. And not even just, no AJ Brown, no Devontae Smith, no Lane Johnson, but even the types of plays they were calling, the types of formations, the lack of motion, all of that. To me, you're going to look at everything and you're going to hit the pause and kind of reset. You got to look at that week 1 game and say, how can we best replicate the things that we did that week? How do we install that moving forward on a more regular basis?
It is confusing to me that, we saw all those pretty motions and we saw some of those creative looks, some of those easy button throws in the first week. And then when you lose these unbelievable receivers, which is obviously going to hurt you. And we're going to talk about that in a sec. It just seems like we haven't seen quite as much of that when probably you need it even more, right? The scheme giving the quarterback answers. The other thing I would say to that, Fran, and this is something you've studied a lot, I think one of my favorite things from the first couple of weeks, it's not just that Saquon is breaking these amazing runs, because he has been spectacular. Like I have been so impressed watching him run, but it seems like to me that this offensive line, particularly like when you get into like Juergens and Becton in particular, like those guys have made some pretty impressive combo blocks, some pulling, as you said, like gap schemes, those type of things. Do you think that this is a better run blocking line than a pass blocking line right now?
Yeah, honestly, I probably do. I would say that, look, we know what to expect with Lane Johnson. We know that when he's healthy, he's as good as it gets in terms of pass protecting tackles in football. I think Jordan is a tier or two below that. He still has some inconsistencies in pass pro, but still like a good, like solid starting tackle when he's moving in reverse. I think when you look at Becton, his issues have been more in the pass game. And I think Landon Dickerson, I've said this a couple times on the show over the last couple weeks. He doesn't look quite right. I do think the bye is for him as well. I don't know if he's like nursing an injury or obviously a lot of these guys are banged up at this point, but I don't know if he's nursing something. We're just trying to get him fully up to speed. He hasn't looked quite himself in pass protection either. So I do think when you get those guys moving forward, and overall, offensive linemen prefer to be like firing off the ball, trying to move guys against their will. That's what they live for. So those guys prefer to be moving forward anyway. And I think when you have a line built the way that the Eagles is, the reason why you want Mekhi Becton inside a guard is for the run game. Like that's what you want. You're envisioning what you had with Brandon Brooks and Lane Johnson. He and Lane Johnson working together, Mekhi Becton at the point of attack. That's what you're hoping for, because you have that on the other side with two behemoths and Jordan Mailata and Landon Dickerson. So trying to replicate that on the other side as well. That's why, to me, like that vertical run game, that downhill run game, that's where this team is at its best.
Yeah, it just seemed to me that in all of the clips that you have shown for our diehard articles, where, I mean, honestly, it's just those guys moving the line of scrimmage, right? And those guys working well in tandem, getting to the second level and getting blocks. Like, it's not like really that special, which is exciting because, it seems like that's replicable. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think it's fair to say, like, I have pushed back on the whole run the ball crowd for many years. I think, you primarily win with the pass, but it does seem like this year when they are calling for it, the Eagles, this is what they are best at right now, at least. Now, part of that is that they have not had AJ Brown for a few weeks, right? And that's AJ Brown, Lane Johnson being out last week. Those are maybe the Eagles' just two best players when you just talk about sheer talent. Obviously the quarterback affects the game a little bit more, all those things. Saquon's obviously up there with the start this year as well. So here's my question, Fran, because, we in Philadelphia, we like when they win shorthanded. That's part of the reason I have a lot of pride for the Super Bowl team, right? I remember that Monday night game against Washington when Jordan Hicks goes down. And I think Peters goes down and you get Big V playing the rest of the year and the offensive line really doesn't miss a beat. Like that is what happens in football. Guys get hurt and you need the depth. You need guys to be able to step up, whether it's for a short amount of time or a long amount of time, whatever. But it's clear that in these first 3 weeks, the Eagles have missed their game breakers, right? They have missed kind of the guy that you can just leave on an island on the right side of the offensive line, and AJ Brown hitting those big plays. And it's a little bit of a bummer because it's like you said, that game in Brazil, look, very small sample size, weird field. They had the whole offseason to prepare for it. That was a lot of fun. They were getting the ball to their playmakers and creating big plays. So
sure.
Here is a statement I will say. Like, do you think if somebody said to you, 90% of the Eagles' offensive issues are going to be solved by getting AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Lane Johnson back, you would say?
Probably not quite 90%, maybe like 55, 60%. I do think that a lot of that would get solved. The only thing that stinks about that, though, Rich, is that, like, I would be interested because to something we were talking about earlier, when you lose AJ Brown and you lose Devontae, you lose Lane Johnson, like, to me, you lean more into some of those schematic advantages, like the motion and the formation variation, all that stuff. You would lean more into that stuff to try and give yourself an edge. If you don't have talent advantage, then you need the schematic advantage, right? So if if we had seen another game, like if they had to play this week, let's say they were playing the Cleveland Browns on Sunday, I don't know like how many of the, would Lane Johnson have been cleared? Probably. Would Devontae Smith have been cleared? We're not sure. AJ Brown, not sure, right? So we don't really quite know what it would have looked like if they had to play a game on Sunday, but I would anticipate that, all right, those guys are all good to go next week. And if they did have they get together and have a meeting of the minds this week in the NovaCare complex and say, hey, we need to lean back into the motion. We need to, incorporate more of that stuff into our offense. Is it going to be only because those stars were back in and now they're leaning back into it, or would it have happened anyway? But I do think that, like getting those guys back, I mean, the offense is going to be certainly better for it. I don't think it fixes every single problem because we saw almost all of those guys in week 2 when they struggled last. We just saw that defense get diced up last night by the Tampa Bay Bucks.
Great game.
I think when you look at this offense, like there are things that need to be fixed, and it's not just talent focused, but the talent certainly will help.
Yeah. And I think you've made a great point there with, I just would have liked to have seen Kellen Moore try a few more things in the past couple of weeks. Not to say it would have worked because, again, you are dealing with a talent deficit here, but it makes sense, right? All of those things we were promised, the under center play action, the motion, the bunch formations. It's surprising that when you have less talent, you go with the more basic stuff that worked for you for a couple years because, hey, look, the quarterback had the clear picture and the talent on the outside was amazing. And, they won basically 75% of their games for 2 years. So it worked out. But that, it's funny. I'm going to compare it a little bit. As you pointed out in your piece this week, like Vic Fangio he's trying stuff, right? With the yep. 3 defensive tackles on the line. Now we might say that might just be a hopeless situation anyway, but at least at least he's trying something and saying, all right, we're going to maybe be a little bit stronger against the run. And we'll have the one edge rusher on the edge. Yeah. I found that a little bit disappointing, the game plan overall, while also admitting it's going to be hard to move the ball without AJ and Devontae. But yeah, so that's where I think I'm at there.
Yeah, I do think that this is an area where you want to see them try and find again, like what is it that you do well, and if what you do well, that was the kind of the conversation we had with Zach on Tuesday was hey, this is a star-driven team. Well, if you don't have those stars, then you need to find the advantage somewhere else, right? And so being able to have those levers that you can pull in those situations, they're clearly in the bag because we saw some things on over the course of the summer during training camp, and then in week 1 against Green Bay, where it's like, okay, like it's there, but how do you pull that out? In those situations where you need them. And so I think that that's certainly something that we can hope to see here coming out of the bye. Now, before we get into the next question, I do want to make sure that we give a little bit of a hat tip to our friends and to our sponsors. So we will jump into that and we'll talk a little more about the Eagles on the other side. All right, so first up, I want to talk about our friends at Empire Today. Now, with Empire Today, you get shop-at-home convenience because, look, it stinks going to like a big box store and trying to go on the road, outside of your own home, and you want to, especially for a big project like floors, where it's like, all right, like you got to talk to somebody, you have to see all these different samples. You're not in your own home to be able to see like how it looks with your walls and with your furniture. Well, that's what Empire Today, they pride themselves on their ability to get you what you need and be able to compare it to what you've got already in your home. They pride themselves on that shop at home convenience, the right product for your needs, quick and professional installation, and a price match guarantee. Empire Today is the best place to get new flooring. So, of course, they've got copycats. There's a lot of people out there that want to try beat what Empire can offer from a service standpoint, but you really can't. When it comes to quality, service, speed, the other people will try and advertise low-quality products that they simply won't carry at Empire Today. Empire Today won't promise the lowest prices because anyone who does, they're putting the flooring in your home that they wouldn't put in their own. So the big thing that you want to look at when you're looking at Empire Today, and one of the things that I love, and I referenced it earlier, is that virtual floor designer. And it's a great way to see how these new floors would look in any space, but obviously, most importantly, your space. So you just take a picture of a room in your house where you want to put the new floors in, and you instantly see how those new floors will look in your room. And so again, if you're going into one of these big box stores, you're talking to somebody, you don't have that ability to compare apples to apples. The person that you're talking to, They might have been working with like roofing equipment or plumbing the day before, and they're not a floors expert. But you go to Empire Today, they live and breathe this stuff. They only do flooring, so you can be confident that you're getting honest, upfront advice. Pride themselves on their convenient shop at home service. They help you shop for floors where you use your floors, so you can see exactly how those are going to look in your own home with your own lighting, your own decor, that you can make that informed decision. Schedule a free in-home estimate today. All listeners receive a $350 off discount when they use the promo code PHLY. Again, that's $350 off. Restrictions apply. See empiretoday.com/PHLY for details.
All right, Fran, I would like to tell you now about our friends at Glatt Hair Restoration. And look, Fran, like losing your hair, it's not a big deal. It happens to a lot of us, not named Zach Berman. And look, if you want to regain some of that hair, look no further than Glatt Hair Restoration, which is under the direction of renowned plastic surgeon Dr. Ken Morgenstern and a well-trained team that brings over 30 years of industry experience. Anyone can buy equipment and say they do hair restoration, but only Glatt Hair offers decades of proven results using an innovative approach and delivered by leaders in the industry. And I think this is probably the big selling point for Glatt, Fran. Each patient, they receive a complimentary one-on-one consultation to pinpoint the best course of treatment. Just because one person's losing, one person has issues up there, somebody else, it might be a whole different deal. And so Glatt will figure that out for you. They will let you come in and see how to proceed moving forward. Bald is now optional. If you want to improve how you look and how you feel about yourself, Glatt Hair has the right treatment for you. Regain your confidence. Visit glatthairmctr.com or call 610-980-4000 to get started. And as a reminder, use code PHLY for $20 off.
All right. So I know you've got a few more here that we're going to get into in the next 40 minutes or so. What's the next one on the list?
All right, next one. And this one is very simple. I mean, this is probably the biggest question facing the team, but I'm going to phrase it in a simple way. Let's say we get rid of 2 to 3, let's say 3 Jalen Hurts turnovers. Let's say we get rid of, I don't know how that last drive goes, but let's say that pick in Atlanta, let's say the first pick against Green Bay where he threw it into double coverage. And let's say the fumble last week, we get rid of that one too. Are people happy with how Jalen Hurts is playing if we get rid of those 3 plays?
Yes, I think so. And I think especially because that's been the problem with these turnovers. Look, a turnover at any time is not ideal, but I think when you look at backed up in your own end, and you reference that first one against Green Bay, it happened on the opening drive, right? So you're backed up in your own end. Now you set them up with good field position. No, this is how the season starts. The defense thankfully holds them field goal, so it wasn't a killer turnover from that standpoint. But you don't want to turn the ball over that deep in your own end. And then you certainly don't want to do it when you're deep in the other team. And we've seen a handful of red zone turnovers already. And even if not red zone, you've seen like close to the red zone. And I think that, that's an area where you just don't want to turn the ball over. And so when you get that sack fumble last week that you referenced, that's points that you're taking off the board. And so even if the Eagles don't score a touchdown there, even if we don't see a touchdown, if you see 3 points, how does that change the construct of the game? How does that change the way things play out? And so I do think that if you take away a couple of those bad decisions, a couple of those turnovers, we are probably talking about Jalen Hurts in a little bit of a different light. And that is the one thing when, we talk about Jalen Hurts and he's here on turnovers, but the other guys that are right there with them are Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. I think they're 2 and 5, like over that same stretch where that is. And I will argue, like, look, turnovers, on face value are not like the worst thing in the world. Not every turnover is created equal. What you don't are the situations where I just laid out. You don't want to turn the ball over in your own end that way, or you don't want to turn the ball over when you're in the red zone. But if you are, if it's 3rd and a mile from your own 25-yard line and you chuck a ball 40 yards downfield and it's picked off and it's essentially an arm punt, that's not the worst. That's not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah,
I think, and that's what we have seen that a lot from Josh Allen. We've seen some of those from Patrick Mahomes, right? And so that's what I would say is that you want Jalen Hurts to knock out some of these turnovers. I don't think all of them are on him. Some of them, as we've described, as we've broken down, some of them might be on the route running or the protection.
The Devontae Smith, the route against New Orleans.
Yeah. Yeah, there's all these other factors, but you just don't want as many of those to happen in the worst possible time frames, which we've seen too often.
It just feels like there's too many of them that are super high leverage turnovers, and a couple of them that are just like they're about 50% too sloppy too, right? Where you can actually pinpoint him and say that was the wrong decision. So you studied Jalen Hurts in college I watched him and when he would play in the SEC championship game and when he
Yep.
play in the college football playoff against for Oklahoma. Were turnovers this big of a problem for him back in college?
No, and that's why, and honestly, like even early in his career, they weren't, right. I mean, we've
No.
seen obviously turnovers happen to everybody, but the turnovers that did with Jalen, it wasn't like, oh, that was a bad decision. Like, what was he thinking throwing that ball, right? We've seen like Will Levis turning the ball over this year for the Tennessee Titans, and they're kind of like laughable, right? That has not been the case for Jalen over the course of his career. I think that look, we like to say like turnovers happen in bunches, sacks happen in bunches, those things happen in bunches. I think that's kind of what we're seeing right now, just with Hurts and with the Eagles offense, but that has not been a historic issue for him.
Yeah, no, I think back to some of the picks from past years where it's like, oh man, I think you do have to give credit to the safety there. That's like a tremendous break on the ball. Like you can see what he was looking at, and there's just been less of them this year. And I don't know how this gets coached out of him. I guess that's probably the hope moving forward is that okay, this has been a rough. It's not a small sample at this point, Fran. It's been basically over a year at this point, but there is also a big sample before that suggests he knows how to take care of the football. We know he clearly cares about this. Like I think somebody pointed out, like his body language after that fumble, like that's about as frustrated as he's been with himself after a play like that, and rightfully so. I mean, that was a killer turnover. So it's been I don't know, it's been hard because I've just watching the games and looking at a couple things. What we've already talked about, that he's not getting a ton of answers from the scheme. The fact that he's been without a bunch of his weapons. Like I have seen some good stretches of play from him, and obviously, like we look at his big throw against the Saints, like that was mesh, right? Like we've been watching that for years. So I don't know. I want to be fair to him. I don't think it's the same type of thing we saw with Carson in 2020, but it is hard to watch those turnovers and not think back to like, ooh, I have seen at least that one play before. I don't think this guy is quite as broken as Carson was back then. But yeah, he's going bad with the turnovers. And it's one of those things I wonder, like, do you have anything more to expound on that? Because I feel like you just say like, yeah, you just can't do that at this point.
Well, and it's funny you brought up Carson because I was actually thinking that as I was talking, I was like, it's not to the level that we saw from Carson in his like final days and his final games with the Eagles, because some of those turnovers were just like, oh, like man, like Carson, like you can't do that. It's been, we haven't seen as many of those type of plays, those type of fumbles late in the down, where it's like, dude, you're trying to do too much. Right now, there have been cases where we've seen it with Hurts, but I don't think that's been the resounding theme. But I mean, outside of it, like it's kind of like the tackling thing, right? Like, yes, you need to get better as a tackling defense, right? Like, you're too many missed tackles, but outside of just doing like tackle drills and tackle circuits, I said it on the postgame show last week. Like these guys are adults; they've been playing football their whole lives. Like they know how to tackle. You still have to like go through the motions. You have to make sure that you're attacking it the right way. But like when Jalen makes a mistake, he knows it, right? And it's just a matter. Don't do it again, right? It's like don't throw late across the middle. Don't have both hands on the football if you're going to break the pocket, if you're starting to scramble, and that fumble we saw against Atlanta. So I think it's more about that. It's just like correcting the small stuff and make sure you're sweating that. But I mean, at the end of the day, like those guys kind of have to take it on themselves to make sure that those turnovers don't happen.
What do you brought up the tackling? We weren't going to bring this up, but I was just thinking about it because after the first game, Nick Sirianni said, "Well, hey, look, we win the first game even after these light training camps and trying to keep everybody healthy, and just one joint practice is really the only kind of serious work that the offense does against another team at this point." Now, I will say the narrative doesn't fit completely because Vic Fangio won the battle and he got some of his starters to play in those preseason games. Do you think that has anything to do with the tackling, or is it just that these players need to tackle better? Because like I see somebody like CJ Gardner-Johnson missing all these tackles. He's also made the best tackle of the year, the one against Bijan Robinson in the hole. That was spectacular. So I don't really know what to make of all that.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that again, these guys have been tackling, as long as they've been playing football, and so yes, you always want to rep that out. You always want to make sure you're practicing it and things like that. But when you're trying to save, you have to like kind of toe that line, and you look around the league, and there are teams that go about it differently. Obviously, Andy Reid, always had very tough training camps and tackle to the ground periods, live periods, more so than most NFL teams. And then you look in like San Francisco, same thing, very tough, hard-nosed practices. Well, you come out of training camp, and you guys it's a mash unit out in San Francisco. Not just right now, but even during camp, they had guys constantly injured, and they had to cancel joint practice for a week because they didn't have enough bodies to be able to go up against another team in San Fran. And so you're kind of towing that line of, all right, would you rather be a little bit rusty in certain areas without having those live drills, or would you rather do the live drills and maybe you're risking yourself injury? And so not that one way is going to be surefire to prevent the other, right? Because the Eagles have dealt with injuries as well so far this year. But I do think that that's the line you have to toe if you're an organization trying to make that call.
Yeah, it's a bummer. I mean, just watching them miss all those tackles, it's just like a helpless feeling. And I don't really know, Avonte Maddox, he's been a good tackler for most of his career, but he's missing a bunch of them right now. Okay. Let's make this next one as short and sweet as possible, because I was talking about this with Roy yesterday and disagreed with him a little bit on it. So
great show yesterday, by the way. I enjoyed the conversation with you and Roy.
Okay, so let's see where you stand on this one. 4 words. Is Bryce Huff salvageable?
Yes, I do think it's
face.
salvageable. Look, it hasn't been good. And you almost have to like separate the run defense from the pass rush. The run defense was always going to be a projection, right? Because he hadn't done it before. And so you were anticipating that was going to be a little bit of a slow start. And even before they even hit the field in practice in training camp, Vic Fangio said he's going to have to, and that kind of like sent off alarm bells with everybody, like in the media corps and certain parts of the fan base. Like, all right, like you just gave all this guy all this money and you're still saying like he's got to see it and he's got to get better there. And I think Vic Fangio was just calling it how he saw it. The more disappointing thing has been the pass rush element of his game. It's just not been there. And no matter what, hand in the dirt, standing up, lining up out wide, lining up right over tackle, one-on-one or part of a game, whatever it is, like he has not been good. He has not been able to win at the top of the rush. In week 1, he was on the ground a bunch of times, and I'm like, all right, like maybe it was the turf, maybe, whatever it was. It's been the same thing, whether it was at Lincoln Financial Field in week 2, or whether it was in the Superdome against Tampa in week 3, or in the heat in 4. All of those different areas, like he just has not been able to get those one-on-one wins that he was known for with the Jets. And so I think you're looking at what you're expecting to see from him. Hopefully this was kind of like, all right, I'm going to look in the mirror. Whatever I have to figure out, whatever I've got to improve on in terms of pass rush reps, that he can figure that out. Because at least if he can give you that, if he can be that sub-package guy, then at least you're getting something out of it. Right now, like you're not getting anything. And it's almost like when when a Nick Castellanos goes cold in season, it's like, all right, like do you bench him? No, you just gotta let him. You just gotta let him go up there and take his hacks. Like you let him go out. He's gonna swing at the first pitch every time, but at some point you think he's gonna come back to you, and that's kind of what you're hoping for right now with Bryce Huff. Is that at some point it's gonna be able to click, because it's not like the Eagles have another guy or two where, all right, we're just gonna give this guy all the reps and we're gonna let Bryce Huff kind of sit in the background. They don't have that because other guys are still trying to figure that out too, whether it's Nolan Smith or, you have a rookie in Jalen Hunt, you have other guys. But I think that right now you just kind of have to let Bryce Huff play this out and just see if he's able to get himself out of the funk.
I would kill for Bryce Huff to have a Casty type of season, this past Casty season, because Casty up until like May 10th, awful, like literally one of the worst regulars in baseball. Quietly very good the rest of the way, right? He's got, I think it's like a 730 OPS, so really means he's been playing well. So if Bryce Huff has the equivalent of the Casty season, I feel like we're looking at 8-7 sacks at this point. That would be awesome. And I think that's the hope for me as well. That is where I disagreed with Roy in saying like, okay, the run defense, like that looks really bad. That looks like that might not be that might not be salvageable. He might not be kind of that every down defensive end, or if it is salvageable, it might not be right away. It might be a couple years down the line, all of those things. But just fundamentally, it's kind of along with what you said. I can't believe a guy like that just forgot how to rush the passer because he moved, 90 miles down down 95. Like I just feel like at some point he's gonna start winning one-on-one. Now, Fran, I guess I have a question too, because I heard Baldy talking about this on Cuz's show. I think Baldy basically said maybe if you get Bryce Huff more in a 4-point stance, those type of things. What type of defense did Huff play in with the Jets? Were there key differences between what he was asked to do for Saleh and what he's currently being asked to do for Fangio?
Yeah, I think the big thing that you saw from him was essentially like he was a wide 9 pass rusher, right? That's essentially what he was for the Jets, where he lined up out wide on passing downs only, put his hand in the dirt, and just went. And to me, that's the big thing, is that early on in the season, I was like week 2, I checked this, and I can probably look it up right now. I know the chat is loving my Wi-Fi right now, so I almost don't want to mess with it, but I could look it up on Next Gen and just get a sense of like his off time. When I looked it up in week 2, he was the best on the team in terms of like coming off the ball, and it was still one of the better times in the league in terms of his get off time. And it's like, all right, like he's still flying off the ball. He's just getting to the top of the rush and just getting completely shut down or thrown to the ground. And so whether it's out of 2-point stance, 3-point stance, 5-point stance, 8-point stance, like he's coming off the ball and he gets there to the point where he's got to make contact with the tackle and he's just erased. And so that to me, like, and there are times where we're seeing him put his hand in the dirt and he's still not winning. And yeah, there are sometimes where he's standing up and not winning, but nothing's working for him right now. And so to me, I think it's more, he's got to get his mind right in terms of, just kind of repping things out. And he can't just run by tackles. Like he did it against Tristan Wirfs the other day. They switched him and Josh Sweat, where Sweat ran over against the right tackle and Huff went over against the left tackle and Wirfs. And the first rep, he just tried to like run around him. He didn't do any kind of move. He didn't do anything. And Wirfs just took his right hand and just punched him in the back of the head and put him into the dirt. You can't do it. And so then he came back the next rep and he was like, all right, now I'm going to try and run through you. And without trying to set up the bull rush or try and do anything. And he ran into a brick wall. And so I think that he's still figuring it out. I'm sure like the confidence is probably not super high right now if you're Bryce Huff. But he's got the week to figure it out and see if he can get rolling.
See, this is another smaller factor fiction fan thing. Whenever I hear the wide 9, I'm just thinking of Jim Washburn. I'm thinking of Jason Babin getting all of those meaningless sacks and just that defense struggling. But yeah, like I think that's got to be the goal for Huff, right? Like, hopefully they can figure out the run defense, how to stop the run or the short passing game, as we saw last week when a team just plays normal 11 personnel. And when they get the third down, he can actually get to the passer. I would take that at this point. Like, don't play him on early downs, but can you give me a sack every other game? I think I would take that at this point.
Yeah, I think that if you can get to that point where he's at least like giving you that juice on 3rd and long and he's becomes that guy. Right now, if you're the Eagles, like that's a win, right? Because right now you're getting a 0 there. So if he can get to that point, that's a nice starting off point. And then we'll see if he can become a full-time player after that.
Do you remember, because you were with the Eagles for a long time, do you remember a player that came in and kind of struggled like that and maybe didn't like recoup all of their value like that the Eagles spent on them, but it at least turned into, not a disastrous contract? Was there really any comparison to this? Because I got to say, this has been pretty rough so far.
Yeah, well, but you know what it is because the Eagles usually, when especially the high price free agent, when they go and spend money on a free agent, they usually work out. Their batting average that way has been pretty good. And so I'm trying to think of one. The only one I could think of right now where I'm like, okay, they spent some money on the guy, and I like DeMarco, but he was just physically just gone at that point. Yeah. Patrick Chung is another one that kind of comes to mind, where it's like, all right, they brought him in to play safety from Belichick. And it was like, yeah, he just didn't have it in this scheme. And then he goes back to Belichick and he plays good football for like 2 or 3 more years up in New England. Right. Who knows? Like something happens here with Huff where it doesn't work out here, and then he goes back up to play for Robert Saleh and they figure it out. But I think that overall, like they've done pretty well in terms of their high price free agents, and this would be the outlier there.
Yeah, I mean, God, they pay Reddick a couple of years ago, and it's not just a good signing; it's a great signing for a few years.
Well, and that's the thing is, people have pointed to, Reddick, he didn't have a sack for his first like 3 or 4 games too, but his pressure rate was still high. Like he was there, and it was like, like he's so close. It's like the Quinyon Mitchell like near interceptions. Like like it's coming, it's right there. He just said like just patient. We just haven't seen that at all from Huff.
Yeah. All right. We should talk about Quinyon Mitchell on the other side of this break.
All right, so I'm going to start things off with talking about our friends at Bet365, where because whatever the moment, it is never ordinary at Bet365. Bet365 has 90 million users worldwide. It live streams 780,000 live events each year. You got the early payout offers across NBA, NFL, NHL, and MLB. Bet365, they pioneered the live in-game betting. And today, Bet365 offers the widest range of games and markets available for live in-game betting across 78 different sports. So it's not just your NBA, NFL, NHL, and MLB, but college sports, and you go right down the line. Basically, anything you're watching, you can get in on the action there with Bet365. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bet when you bet just $5. You can use the code PHLY365 to sign up, deposit $10, and you place a bet for $5 to get $200 bonus bets. That's the open account offer. Bonus bets can be used on the spread, totals, player props, futures, and much, much more. And then one feature I love personally, Rich, is the early payout offer when you're watching football. With the Bet365 early payout offer, you are a winner if your team goes up by 17 points with an instant payout on straight bets and parlay selections marked as winners. So you download the app, you use the code PHLY365 when you sign up, and then again, if let's say you're watching that Alabama Georgia game last week, and Alabama, they've got that early lead, and then you start sweating early because Georgia's coming back. I can't lose this bet. Well, as soon as Georgia goes up 17, you're good. You cash out and you're all set, because again, that's not just NFL that I'm talking about with the Eagles and other NFL teams. That factors in for college football as well. Also, you want to pay attention to your boosts. If you follow along with our friend Jamie Lynch, these boosts that come up every day. Bet365 power ups the odds on hundreds of bets to give you a chance to win more with over 10,000 boosts every single month. And these boosts specific markets, your winnings, and even parlays, so you can keep an eye out for their custom PHLY bets and boosts. And again, follow Jamie Lynch for more on that. Download the Bet365 app. Use code PHLY365 when you sign up to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet $5. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 and older and physically located in Pennsylvania. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER.
Fran, a lot has changed for us over the past few years. A lot has changed for us over the past few months. Now we're doing a podcast together after being friends for a little while here. But you know what has not changed, Fran? Miller Lite. And as a longtime light beer drinker, Miller Lite has always been the gold standard to me. My friends and I, if we're going to the bar to watch the Eagles game and they're complaining about running the ball, about off coverage, about not blitzing enough, basically, a bunch of set joiners around me. You know what they have in front of them, Fran? They have Miller Lite ahead of them. Only 96 calories, great taste, and less filling. As anyone who has watched a game over the past few weeks, they've seen that commercial with Jorge Posada and Luke Wilson, David Ortiz. It is both. Great taste and less filling. You don't have to choose what's best. Miller Lite is both great taste and it is less filling. It tastes like Miller time. To get Miller Lite delivered right to your door, visit millerlite.com/PHLYBirds, or you can find it pretty much anywhere that sells beer. Just go to the bar around the corner. They got Miller Lite. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories. That's the key. 96 calories per 12 ounces. Great taste, but also less filling. Fewer calories and carbs than a premium regular beer. That is Miller Lite, friend. All right, let's get to the last two. And I think for the most part, we've been a little negative so far because, look, it's been an up and down season so far. It's not all sunshine and rainbows here. But
right.
You mentioned Quinyon Mitchell, and
yep.
I was talking to Roy yesterday about the mic'd up video of him talking smack with Mike Evans and giving it right back to him. And it's been noticeable. We don't need the mic'd up video to know that that's what Q likes to do, right? Like he has been talking smack. He's been in guys' faces a lot this year. And frankly, he's been in their faces after forcing incompletions. It's been a super encouraging start for him. And I think you are the perfect person to talk to about this because, I wasn't watching Sauce Gardner's reps closely when he first started with the Jets. All of the great corners, Darrelle Revis, all of these other people. So, when I see Quinyon Mitchell doing a great job against Mike Evans, really doing a great job every other week, like he's making a few mistakes. There was the one play you pointed out on the final drive against Atlanta where he didn't get enough depth on that. I believe it was cover 2. Okay, that's all right. That's rookie stuff. But in terms of just like, is he contesting catches? Is he around the ball? This dude very much looks the part, Fran. And I guess what I want to say is, okay, let's put it as a statement right here. Quinyon Mitchell is a future Pro Bowler. Fact or fiction?
I think that's a fact. I think that he's going to be a Pro Bowl corner. And I was really high on him coming in. I watching him last summer, so off his junior tape at Toledo, and then watching him as a senior, and then watching him at the Senior Bowl, and then watching him at the Combine. You go through every step, and it's just like, I just love this kid more and more the more I watch him. I thought the Eagles got a steal, honestly, with where they got him in the draft in the first round. And so I do think that this is a Pro Bowl corner. I'm not shocked at all by the way that he's playing. And especially like comparing him to Terry and Arnold. And those guys are going to get compared because a lot of people viewed Arnold as the better corner. Some people viewed Mitchell as the better corner. And I think the Eagles made the right choice. I think when you look at Arnold, it's been a lot of penalties, and he's been a very competitive player. He has that right mentality as well. But I think when you look at Mitchell, he's been so disciplined. He's this close to a pick six. He's been so close a couple of times. He's going to get one. And what I love is like no panic whatsoever. He's if he is attacked vertically, if he does get beat, because you're going to get beat when you play corner, that's what happens. You're going to get beat vertically down the field. No panic. He's able to turn and find the football. And even if he doesn't like force the incompletion, just the fact that he's there and like that tight in the area, it goes back to what I was saying. Like, you don't need to be playing press coverage to play tight coverage. And I think that's what we've seen from Quinyon Mitchell. I'm really excited about his future. And so I think if you're an Eagles fan, like, you have to be. I don't know if he's going to be, Darrell Revis, Patrick Surtain, like that level, but I do think like, this is a Pro Bowl corner. He's going to be a really good one.
So yeah, I mean, that's the reason I think Saquon on offense is probably the reason you're most excited. But Quinyon, I feel like it's almost been even a little bit underrated that, like, okay, it's because this defense overall is not playing that well. They seem to have a major problem with either the run or the passing game every single week. Not the Saints game, but too many drastic lows. But you have a guy that you took in the first round that looks like is going to be a cornerstone part of your defense for a long time, and that's really exciting. That's super important.
Yeah, and I think that too, when you're looking at corners, sometimes, it can be the good things that they do. It's not always shown, right? Maybe you're deterring a throw that would have been downfield. Another guy may have given up, and the quarterback would have taken that chance and pushed it down the field. But because you were there, well, now the quarterback's going somewhere else and you don't see it. And you almost want your good corners to be able to kind of lull you to sleep with how boring watching their film can be. And that's kind of what I've seen from Quinyon Mitchell. And speaking of lulling to sleep, we do have a super chat here from Shay. And so I wanted to give some love to Shay in the chat, who dropped a comment here. Khalif needs a new mattress. Do y'all have any recommendations? So, Khalif, I got nothing for you. But I think that when you're looking at, because we don't want to give any free advertisement here, Rich. But look, we all know that sleep is extremely important. Just that, look, if you're Zach, I'm sure Zach's got a really good mattress. He probably could use a little bit more, but you got to have a good mattress if you're sitting up on your laptop late at night, like Zach typically is. So, I don't want to give free advertising, but getting a good mattress, you want to be able to test it out, make sure you like what you're buying.
It's key. I think I have bought mattresses before just online without actually trying it out.
Oh, no.
They have not been my favorite match. I thought I knew what I was looking for, Fran, and it didn't work out. So that I would say, go to the store. If you can go to one of the actual brick and mortar stores, just go lay on the mattresses those days. Like, that seems like a wonderful day, even if you don't end up purchasing those mattresses, right? You get some nice naps. You can nap in public, and it's actually socially acceptable at that point. So that is what I think I would do if I was Khalif.
Yeah, I would absolutely go to one of the stores and go and do it. Look, it's like we were talking about with Empire earlier. Like, you don't want to do that over the phone. You don't want to do that. Go to one of the special stores and go test drive them.
I like a firmer mattress though. That's my that's what I've learned over.
Yeah, I like a softer. I like going a little bit of give.
Well, okay. See, there we go. Right. I think and Khalif, go figure out where you fall on the Rich Fran spectrum, and we'll get it get it to go. So Quinyon Mitchell, you mentioned the Senior Bowl, and I think that was what excited me the most. Obviously, you're somebody who has watched all of his college tape as well, but you go to the Senior Bowl every year. Reading what everybody said about him at the Senior Bowl, where basically he was an off coverage guy, a zone corner for a lot of his career at Toledo. But he goes to the Senior Bowl and they put him in press man coverage.
Yep.
And he held up pretty well, right? And that was a big deal that week.
Yeah, because you honestly, like, watching him on film, it was like, all right, like, I learned this from somebody a long time ago. When you're watching corners, is you almost like have like your checklist, right? Of like, all right, can you play zone from press? Can you play zone from off? Can you play man from press? Can you play man from off? And you're like, do you have ball skills? Do you have instincts? Do you have speed? Do you have short area quickness? Like, you have all the physical traits, but like, can you accomplish all of these tasks from a coverage standpoint? And I'm looking at Quinyon Mitchell. I'm like, look, it's been the press coverage reps were few and far between. You didn't see a ton of it. He was asked to play press, like, I want to say it was like 7% of the time. It was something wild. He never played up on the line of scrimmage. When he was asked to do it, it looked really good. You just didn't see a ton of it. And so going down to the Senior Bowl, where you're going up against, in theory, like the other top players at the position or in your class, to be able to see him go down there and do that against other like day 1 and day 2 draft picks and play press man and all the one-on-one reps, he was in press man. He was like, yeah, like, all right, you guys have this question about me. Here it is. And he went and he was awesome. So I'm sitting there up in the bleachers and I just, it was like exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, Quinyon Mitchell, everything you wanted to see. It was awesome.
And yet this guy still falls to the Eagles, where they stick and pick and they pick him up. So yeah, that seems like a great start for him so far.
Yeah, no question.
Last one, and then we'll get out of here and we'll get everybody ready for the Phillies this weekend. Actually, bye week worked out perfectly for Philadelphia fans as well.
Yeah, you're not lying.
Just because we got 2 home games this week against the hated New York Mets. So that worked out well for everybody.
Where do Mets fans stand on like your power rankings of like most hated fan bases?
High
in all sports.
I was thinking about this,
yes.
and I wrote about this in the newsletter. I think for me, I still think the Cowboys are number 1.
Yep.
Just because there's something about football that just, I don't know, it brings out the tribalism in me, and the Cowboys are number 1. I think the Mets might be number 2. It's funny. I have a lot of friends who are kind of 4-for-4 Philadelphia fans.
Yep.
In recent years, they have thrown the Boston Celtics up pretty high as well. Now, I view basketball a little bit more like you view football, where I'm more studying it as well. I understand that they have kind of owned the Sixers over the past few years, historic rival. I think it's Cowboys 1, Mets 2, I would say.
That's growing up, and that's kind of how I reflect on it. Is like, all right, like growing up, like for me, because I was 4-for-4 growing up. I always hated the Mets, man. And like Mets fans, especially like, they come down to the Vet or to Citizens Bank Park. And, so there's plenty of that crossover there to be Mets fans and San Francisco. Like Mets fans to me, like easily top 3. And honestly, like might be number 1 for me, like growing up. Like, I just, it was like that. And like the Jersey Devils, like in hockey, like always got under my skin as well. So I would put them on that list as well.
Yeah, and I think for hockey, like if you got older, I think the Crosby, the Pittsburgh Penguins would probably be somebody who was worked their way. But yeah, those Devils 90s teams were pretty rough. No, I'm with you. The Mets are super high, and honestly, the memory is kind of going to my first Phillies games at the Vet and just being like, whenever they would put the Mets, I'd be like, man, there's just way too many of these people here. Like it's just ridiculous. And I think these people, they just come down from Central Jersey, North Jersey, and it's probably the same commute that it is going through all the New York traffic to Queens. So yeah, it was honestly 2007 and 2008 making those comebacks against the Mets were some of the best memories. Like it really, as much as we don't like the Mets, the Phillies and Mets have not really been good at the same time.
No question.
For a long time.
Where were you in 07, like 07, 08? Like at that point, where were you like life-wise?
Senior in high school. So, and then a freshman in college. So I actually went to, when they came back in 08, I went to college in New York, and I went to a full series at Shea Stadium in September. I think the Phils were still battling with the Mets. It wasn't quite the 7 games in 17 days type of comeback, but I will always remember I went to the Friday game, and I think they were still trailing them, and Phillies won 1-0, and Greg Dobbs hit the foul pole, and that was the that was, I always say, I was like, man, I went to a couple of those Mets games, and then a month later, the Phils are hoisting the trophy. So it was good. So yeah, I think good timing for the Eagles as well too, because
Yes.
everybody's going to be super focused on this, and rightfully so. Okay, last one, Fran, because there was something you wrote a couple weeks ago that I thought was perfect, because I am pretty hard on Jordan Davis. Like, I would like to see more from him, but you pointed out when the Eagles really struggled against the Falcons running game in week 2, you were like, yeah, the Eagles struggled with a lot of these concepts. And, obviously the first person a lot of people look at is Jordan Davis, because he is here ostensibly to stop the run. That should be his best thing. But you point out, like, really, like the film said, like this, he wasn't as responsible for a lot of these plays. So I would just say overall, because you have Jalen Carter, who has that one unbelievable game, one of the best games from an Eagles defensive tackle I have seen in a long time, which is impressive because our former co-worker Fletcher Cox had a super long career here, and he had a bunch of those games as well. You have Nolan Smith, you have Keely Ringo, you have Nakobe Dean. I guess the Georgia Dogs, I feel like a lot of people were on board with that, because Howie had made some picks for, some Pac-12 players, Andre Diller, JJ Arcega-Whiteside, whatever. Obviously this is a little bit of an oversimplification, just boiling it down to the conference you pick from. But with a lot of these picks, where do you stand on the Georgia Dogs right now?
So I think with Jordan, I would say he's definitely been a disappointment, right? I mean, the fact, and it's like the Bryce Huff conversation where he split it up in terms of like run game, pass game. He certainly has not reached the bar that you want from a pass rushing standpoint. Like, he is not what you were hoping that he would become by year 3 in terms of being like that. All right, like he's taken that next step where he could be an impact rusher from the interior. Is he going to give you some reps? Absolutely, but it's not to the point where you can like steadily rely on him, even like first and second down. Like, all right, like give us a little bit of juice. Hey, if it's 3rd and long where you're probably coming off the field anyway, but give us a little bit of juice. He's not giving you that right now. And I think as a run defender, I think Jordan Davis is going to play in the league for a long time. I do. I think that he is going to be a high floor player. And the thing is that I just don't think that he's like that dominant run defender right now. I think when you look at him, he's really good at holding the point of attack, eating up blocks, keeping linebackers clean. Like, he does that well. I think for him to take that next step, what you want to see from him more consistently is, all right, you lock out the blocker, right? So you see both hands like go right into the block, and he's holding him. He's got the ability to control, but like, don't just be happy to like stop the block. Get off the block and go get the ball, right? And to me, like, I think you see so often that that Jordan is fine, like being stalemated and holding and letting other guys go make the play. You want him to start being that guy that's going to go make the play, right? And so I think that that's probably the next step you're hoping from Jordan. If he doesn't take that step to be like that elite run defender, and he's still not giving anything as a pass rusher, he clearly is not going to reach the expectation in terms of that draft slot, right? And so, if he can at least reach elite run defender status, that at least gives you a little bit something. But right now, you just haven't gotten it. I think as far as the other guys, look, it's still early for Nolan Smith. I think that what we've seen so far, I like the way that he plays. I like his play style. He's got all the tools to be able to win in terms of like his like speed and his flexibility. I think he shows more power than people give him credit for. He's really competitive against the run. He does some good things there. And so I'm willing to say, like, all right, jury's still out there. Let's see him still play things out. I think from Nakobe, I think honestly, like from what we've seen from him this year, this was my expectation of him coming out. I think when all the talk about him being a 1st-round player was a little bit overblown, personally, I felt like where the Eagles got him in the 3rd round, that's kind of where I always kind of saw him in terms of like draft value. I thought that he was more of like a late day 2, early day 3 type of pick. I think when you are his size, with his lack of like outstanding physical tools, he's not like super explosive. He's not like the best athlete. And obviously he's undersized too. It's tough. You could be one or the other and still be a really good linebacker. It's tough to be both. And I think that's kind of what you're looking at with Nakobe. And if he doesn't see things clearly, if he doesn't like immediately trigger and go get the ball, he's just going to be behind the 8 ball too often. And I think that's kind of what you see from Nakobe right now. And so I would say so far this year, he's about what I expected. Jordan Davis is not meeting that expectation, and I think jury's still out on Nolan and also Keely Ringo as well. You throw him into that mix.
Yeah. who would you say, just to finish up with Jordan, like is Vita Vea the guy that he should be studying? Like who are some of the best players in the NFL at what you're saying? Like not just getting stalemated, but getting off those blocks and making those tackles for losses in the backfield.
To me, the guy that you would hope that he would become, like at this point, like if you assume he's not going to become that dynamite pass rusher, like you're hoping that he becomes like what Linval Joseph was at like the peak of his powers.
Okay.
And that was like the cool thing about them bringing in Linval for that Super Bowl run was like, all right, like this is a good player for Jordan Davis to be able to like pick his brain and kind of like learn, go through the paces of stuff with him. Because if he can become that, like that's really good. And I again, we haven't seen that from him up to this point. The thing with Vita Vea, like, dude, he is a dominant run defender, and he's like unstoppable when he comes off the ball to stop to bull rush you. He is just so, and even like Dexter Lawrence, like that. If Jordan were to reach that point, like you'd be thrilled. That's exactly what you're hoping for if you trade up and take that guy in the top 15. And he's just a long ways away from that right now.
Yeah, Vita Vea was a nice pass rush on Becton last week. He's good. Tampa Bay, I'm happy the Eagles don't have to play them, even though they are roughly an average to slightly above average team. They just Todd Bowles, Baker Mayfield, that whole crew. It just seems like they have the Eagles number.
No question. And Vea, I mean, he's just so much fun to watch. Like a truly unique player. On the inside.
Yeah, no, like when he's not playing the Eagles, I enjoy watching him because you just don't really see guys who are built like that, move like that. Very impressive.
Yep.
All right, Fran, I think that's about it.
Yeah. All right. So that's all. Well, dude, this was fun, man. It's look, it's the bye week, like you said earlier. It's a perfect timing for an Eagles fan. Like, kind of unplug a little bit. You may have been a little bit sick of watching this team after watching them a week ago. So now you plug in. You got the Phillies on Saturday, Phillies on Sunday. Hopefully the Phillies can go 2-0, take care of business here against the Mets that you and I have already shared our distaste for here. So enjoy the weekend, and we'll be back next week. The PHLY Eagles show. It'll be our regular game week next week. So we've got Bo, Zach, everybody will be back next Monday right here on the PHLY Eagles show. Bo will be mad at me if I don't close the way that he normally would, and I will close this way because I think it's fair. Thanks so much for joining us on the PHLY Eagles show, and as always, we love you.
We all silly like the mayor.